What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to TCG Madness. It's another day, which means it's time for another One Piece card game deck profile. And today we have a very nice Shanks budget build for you guys. This deck will run you just under $40 at the time of this recording, as of course on TCG Plays I get my prices, and sometimes the cards can fluctuate. So just for accuracy's sake, at the time of this recording, this deck will cost you just about under $40. Now, before we get into the deck, talk about the hero, the cards itself, do me a big favor right now, hit that like button. If you're new, consider hitting that subscribe button. Don't forget to also hit the notification bell so you guys never miss when I drop a video. Comment down below if there is maybe a leader that you guys would like me to build, do a budget build next for. Please, you can comment down below, or you can also comment down below if you guys agree, disagree with the deck choices, all that kind of stuff. Maybe you think I missed a card that should actually go in this deck that would be a little bit better than what I have currently built. Love to hear from some of you guys, and don't forget to also stick around to the end because I will show you some cards that will definitely give this deck the pop it needs. Unfortunately though, we will go way over our budget. For these budget builds, I usually like to keep these decks under $45. I think under 45 is very reasonable, especially for One Piece the card game, because One Piece is still a very expensive card game right now at the moment, especially if you're going to build a very competitive deck. I like to do a series here on this channel where I basically just take a lot of the leaders and just build budget builds for you guys under $45. And the reason why I do these budget builds is just for one of a couple of reasons. Number one, again, very expensive. So doing budget builds will help you, ring in that spending a little bit, especially for the new year, especially with all of these card games out, booster boxes, booster sets, starter decks, all that kind of stuff. So building a nice budget deck is pretty good for your wallet. Number two, when I build these budget builds, it's also good to maybe build the deck, see if that actually fits your play style. And if you do really like that deck, well then guess what? You can turn around, just break the bank and splurge and really build a very competitive deck. And number three, sometimes not everybody wants to really build a very high competitive expensive deck. So that's where these budget builds do come in hand. So you can build a flurry of these decks without breaking the bank. Under $45, you can probably build yourself a nice, build 3, 4, 5 decks versus maybe one very expensive competitive deck. That's the reason why I do a lot of these budget builds. So again, if you like this type of stuff, you're at the right channel. Consider hitting that subscribe button. Really would appreciate that. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the deck itself. Starting off, we have the leader, of course. Let's go ahead and talk about the leader. This is Shanks, 5 life, once per turn. This effect can be activated when your opponent attacks. Give up to one of your opponent leader or character cards minus 1,000 power during this turn. So this is a pretty defensive build of a deck here. Once per turn, when your opponent attacks you, it's basically like having like a free counter on him, but instead of having like that minus like 2,000 or 3,000, we only do minus 1,000 to either a character or your opponent's leader card. So not the greatest when it comes to, but still pretty good on its own face. What we're focusing when we're building this deck is that right there, the minus 1,000. We want a lot of cards that are either going to continue to subtract to your opponent's cards, or we want cards that are going to boost up our cards. So while we're subtracting from our opponent, we're going to be boosting our own stuff. So those are the kind of the two synergy components that I went with this deck. So for the deck itself, you guys can see here it is right here, and I will go over all the cards and all the copies that go in it. Starting off, we have 4 copies of Building Snake. He has an effect, activate main. You may place this character at the bottom of the owner's deck. Give up to one of your opponent's character minus 3,000 power during this turn. This is a great drop of a card right here to just kind of drop on the board and, just use it whenever you feel like it is absolutely necessary. You can do it early game, late game. You definitely need 4 copies of this card. It's also a threat. Your opponent may have to actually deal with it by removing it, or they just have to know that it's coming. Again, having that little extra threat on the board really is troublesome for your opponent. Next up, 4 copies of Uta. It has a nice effect that says on play, look at 5 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 red-haired pirate type card, and add it to your hand. Then place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. We have a lot of red-haired pirates, so again, Building Snake's one of them. You guys can see Hongo's another one, Shanks, all that other stuff. Really good card for really good search engine. Next up, we have a 2-drop Sanji. We need 4 copies of this in the deck. This is actually a really, really good card. Actually, I believe the most expensive card in this deck, by the way, which is pretty funny. So it has effect, activate main. Once per turn, you may add 1 card from your life area to your hand. This character gains plus 2,000 power during this turn. Then give this character up to 2 rested Don cards. For a 2-drop, it doesn't get much better than this. The only thing this card is actually missing is Rush. Honestly, if this thing just had Rush, this would be like an ace. This card would be actually way more expensive. This card's about, I believe, almost $5 a card. So this is going to be the most expensive cards in this deck. But right there, play it. add a life, so you're getting you're drawing a card, even though it's from your life. You are drawing a card from your life. Then he's going to get plus 2,000 power, so that's going to give him 5,000. Then you're going to give him up to 2 Rested Dawn. This 2-drop becomes 7,000 on the board. Really, really good card right there. And again, you can activate this once per turn. So the only thing it's missing is Rush. Like, that would be like an unbelievable card if it had that. Next up, we have 4 copies of Hongo. He costs 3 for a 3,000. He has an effect, activate main. You may rest this character. If your leader has the red hair pirate, it does. Type, give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 2,000 power during this turn. Again, another good card that has good synergy with your leader. Next up, we have a Baccarat for cost 3, 4,000. It also has a nice little blocker and has a nice effect as well. Once per turn, you may trash 1 card from your hand up to one of your leader or character cards, gains plus 2,000 power during this battle. Again, so if we're doing addition by subtraction, knock down some of your opponent's stuff, but this card will actually give you 2,000 power back. Pretty good card, and it's a blocker. Definitely I think for most decks that I pretty much build, you need anywhere between like 12 to 16 blockers in a deck. Like, that's just kind of what it is. And you guys can see right here, all of these cards right here that we're about to go over next, they're all blockers. You do need that many blockers in this game. Definitely prolonging your opponents. Next up, 4 copies of Kingdew. Blocker, of course, and it also has another effect. On the opponent's turn, when this character is KO'd by your opponent's effect, up to one of your leader gains plus 2,000 power during this turn. So if he's removed, no worries, which, you know, that does happen mainly with the blockers. But if he's removed, don't worry. You're going to get plus 2,000 added to your leader. Really good card, good synergy as well. Another blocker, we have Lucky.Roux, and he also has another ability too. He's got blocker, and he's got on KO, if your leader has the red hair pirate type, KO up to one of your opponent's character with a base power of 6,000 or less. I love this card so much right here. This one, it works 2 ways. So if he has the blocker, so you're negating an attack, and then once he is KO'd, which is most likely going to happen, you get to just remove something that's 6,000 or less. Really, really good card right there. Really good defensive and removal card. And a deck that has pretty much no removals whatsoever. This one works really good for all the right reasons. And he's also a 5,000 blocker, which is still pretty good on its own. Next up, we have Silver's Rayleigh. Cost 5, 6,000, a blocker, and it has an effect on play. If your opponent has 2 or more characters with a base power of 5,000 or more, draw 2 cards and trash 1 card from your hand. I like this because obviously it works as a draw engine, so it's pretty good, and it's another blocker. I only have 2 copies of this in the deck. This might be something I may upgrade, but the other copy I went with 5 of this 5-drop right here. Yasopp, I went with 4 copies of him, 6,000 power. He also has an effect on play. Up to one of your leader gains 1,000 power until the end of your opponent's next turn. And then for 1 Dawn on him, when attacking, give up to one of your opponent's character minus 1,000 power during this turn. It's basically like having another leader on the board, another Shanks right on the board. So that's kind of why I went with the 4 and 2 split there. Might be something I might, maybe do 3 and 3 or something like that. Maybe I just leave it. When I was doing some play testing, I have realized this does work pretty well so far. So not too much, manipulating needs to go on with this deck. Now we get into some of the big boys. 4 copies of Benn.Beckman. He has the effect on play, trash up to one of your opponent's character with 6,000 power or less. Again, another removal. Pretty good there. I just wish this card had Rush. That's pretty much one thing I do notice with this deck. I do wish I had some characters with some Rush. That might be something I may change later. I'll also show you some cards that are a little more expensive that do give your characters Rush. I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the video. This is the other card that's also, I think, the second most expensive card in this deck. This is Edward.Newgate. This is from the starter deck. 8,000 power, cost 7, has effect on play. Give up to 1 Rested Dawn card to your leader or one of your characters. Activate main. You may rest this character, KO up to one of your opponent's character with 5,000 power or less. The reason why that second ability is so good is because you have a lot of cards in here that pretty much say negative 2,000 to this character, negative 1,000 here. That outside of your leader, of course. Drop in this Edward.Newgate, just that, tap that down and just remove something. Even if it was like, let's say 7,000 power, you can get it all the way down to 5,000 and have it removed by Edward.Newgate. This is a really, really, really good card in this deck. Definitely need 4 copies of this one. And yes, this is, I believe, either the most or the second most expensive card outside of Sanji. This is where your budget's going to kind of come into handy here. And then next up for characters, we have a 10-drop Shanks. This is the only card that I have with Rush in it. It's something I may manipulate a little bit. I do think I want a little bit more with Rush, but it does say give all of your opponent's character minus 1,000 power, and then it has Rush. This card can attack on the turn in which it was played. And I do have 3 copies of this one because he's a big 10-drop body. And with this deck, you do need this. Unlike the other Yamato deck that I built, I wasn't too sure about the 10 drops. This deck, you do play a lot of defensive with this deck, a lot of negating, stuff like that, to get to this point where you drop that big body 10 drop and then just start swinging in for game. So those are the characters. As far as the counters go, we have 5 counters. We have Bad Manners, Kick Horse, effect, counter. You may trash 1 card from your hand up to one of your leaders, plus 3,000 power during your turn. It's a 0 cost card, so that's why it's in the deck. And then we have 3 copies of the Radical Beam, effect, counter up to one of your leaders or character cards, gains plus 2,000 power during this battle. Then, if you have 2 or less life cards, this card gains additional 2,000 power. It also has the trigger up to one of your leaders or character cards, gains plus 1,000 power during this turn. So that is the deck itself. This deck will run you $39.94 right now at the time of this recording. So we are just under that $40 range right there. I do think this is a pretty good budget build. Of course, not without its flaws, because that's what you have to do when you're talking about these budget builds. They do have their flaws. Like, again, this deck is very slow, not a lot of rush. Might be something I manipulate later. But if you like this deck and you really want to go all out, at least have a couple of cards that you can definitely buy that will break the bank, but definitely give this deck some much needed firepower. And I'll go ahead and show you those cards right now. Starting off, we have Goldie Rogers. This is from Emperors in the New World. You can see right there, this card costs $5.80. I would definitely put this one in the deck. May even better than the Shanks that I have in there. I'd definitely probably go either 2 or 3 copies. It has Rush, and then it has when your opponent activates blocker, if either you or your opponent has 0 life cards, you win the game. So they basically, once you get to that point of the game, they cannot utilize blockers at all. And again, it's a really good ace in the hole. I definitely like this card. But the card I would definitely put in this Shanks deck if you had an unlimited budget is this one right here. It's Silver's Rayleigh. You can see it's from 2 Legends. You can see how much this card costs. It's almost $40 a copy here. So this one definitely would want 4 copies in your deck. And you guys can see right there, that's going to put your budget already over $100 and something. Now we're looking at almost a $200 deck here. So, but it has this ability on play, select up to 2 of your opponent's characters and give one character 3,000 power and the other 2,000 power until the end of your opponent's next turn. Then KO up to one of your opponent's character with 3,000 power or less. Great synergy with the Shanks deck right there. And it's a very powerful card. And of course, that's why it costs almost $40. Pretty much does cost $40 a copy right there. And then last but not least, I would definitely take a look at this card to add to the Shanks deck. I mentioned earlier that I definitely want cards with Rush. But what if you can play a card that gives all your characters that are red Rush? Well, Nefertilia Vivi definitely has that. And it has all of your red characters with a cost of 3 or more, other than this character, gain Rush. So again, remember the deck we have right there? We have a lot of characters that have Rush. So you goes 3 or more, right? So that's Hongo, that's Baccarat, that's Kingdew, Lucky, Silvers, Yasopp, Benn.Newgate, and of course Shanks himself. So you guys can see this card would definitely be an added firepower to the deck that would definitely make this deck way more aggressive, which I do think it does need. Otherwise, the current build that I kind of have is very defensive. So again, if you were to add 4 copies of this to the deck, you guys can see that's going to be $20. The Vivi and the Goldie Roger, not that expensive, right? You can definitely add them in there. It's really this card that you would definitely want to pay attention to, that Silver's Rayleigh, $40 a copy, but it would definitely be needed in this Shanks deck. And that's going to do it for this video. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Again, don't forget, this weekend I will do some gameplay over on Felt Table with this deck to kind of show you some of the combos, some of the pieces, how this deck kind of works, to see if it maybe, if you like this deck and you want to build it, well, maybe go check out some of that gameplay footage that I will drop Saturday this weekend. And again, if you made it this far in the video, please, again, do me the big favor, hit that like button. If you're new, consider hitting that subscribe button. Don't forget to also hit that notification bell so you guys never miss when I drop a video. Comment down below. And as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll see you guys next time.